Сәхибҗамал һәм Кәрим Габдулла әрләшәләр.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Diversity Podcast, where we embrace identity and different cultures. I'm so glad to do this episode today, guys, because my today's guest is a person of kind heart and genuine soul, is Michael. He's Syrian Christian, which is a rather rare person and mix. Michael is actually the very first person from Syria who I met. We met in 2017 in Liverpool when I was doing my master there. Michael was born in Tartus, Syria, which is a city on the Mediterranean coast of Syria. And also he lived in Canada for a while, and now he lives in the UK. So in today's episode, we will dive into peculiarities of Syrian society. Potentially we discuss some Assyrian culture and what it's like being Christian and being raised in predominantly Muslim country. Hi Michael, I'm so happy to see you today and to do an episode with you.
Hi Violetta, yeah, I'm very excited. It's been quite a long time we haven't met each other.
Yeah, I think it's actually 6 years.
6 years, yeah.
You didn't change, I told you this already, right?
Neither did you.
I hope so. Well, I hope I matured. Yeah, so as I said, Michael is from Syria. He was born there and raised. He actually lived in Damascus, I learned today, but was born in Tartus. So, Michael, let's start maybe with explaining to our listeners the makeup of Syria, both ethnically and religiously. So, what are the main ethnicities which exist in Syria and what religions there, apart from Islam?
Yeah, of course. So don't quote me for this, I'm not a historian, but as far as I understand, Syria is one of the very old countries, of course, and Damascus is actually the oldest, as far as I know, the oldest capital that's been inhabited. So there've been plenty of races and different cultures that have been through the country of Syria, leading to this mix that we have today. So if we want to start from the end, so from today, we'd say that I think predominantly Syria has what we call Syrian Arabs. And this is the vast majority of people in Syria, ethnically speaking. Racially, they would be Caucasians. Other ethnicities, we have Armenians, who came from Armenia. We have Kurds from Kurdistan. We have some Assyrians as well. So speaking of Assyrians, I think the oldest people to live in Syria were Assyrians and Arameans. However, today, to have a pure Assyrian, it's not very common. And this has to do, like I said, with the mixture of cultures that's been through the country throughout the history. So, for example, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, then followed by Islam, followed by the Ottoman occupation and French occupation. So all of this has led to kind of a mix in the race. But to answer your question, predominantly, ethnically speaking, I think we can call them Syrian Arabs. And the reason we say Syrian Arabs is because they are slightly different from what comes to mind when you say Arab, because the Arab culture started in the Gulf areas and then spread throughout the Arab world, where we have 22 Arab countries. And ethnically, these 22 countries are different, so you have to be a little bit more specific when you say Arab. So that's why they're called.
So yeah,
Syrian
Arab
Arabs.
Basically is not ethnicity. Yeah.
It's not on its own.
It's just someone who speaks Arabic, correct?
Yeah. So I think in these days when you say someone is Arab, they are coming from an Arabic country where they speak Arabic.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, well, even me, growing up and not having I've been exposed mostly to Buddhist and Christian people, I think, throughout my bachelor and student life in Moscow. Arabic. Okay, understood. So, as you said, as mentioned, Assyrians. They are indigenous people of Syria then? Well, it wasn't Syria back then, I guess, right? In Mesopotamia. Because when I was preparing for this episode, I was reading about Assyrian people, and it does say that there are 100 or 200,000 of them live in Syria currently, and even 4,000 in Russia somehow live. Have you ever met or do you know any Assyrian people? And if you do, as I said earlier, Michael is Syrian Christian. So my question is, have you ever met or do you know any Assyrian people? As I understand, I read about Assyrians as an old nation, like not even, I don't know if it wouldn't be wrong to say ancient ethnicity, but it says that it's old ethnicity, and now there are very few of them, but they still exist. So have you ever met any of them or do you know them?
Being completely honest, I haven't.
You haven't? Okay.
Well, having said that, my wife's friend is Assyrian.
Okay.
She moved to Australia to pursue her studies and kind of education, but she tells me that they met at some point in church, and she learned that that person was Assyrian.
So she's a Syrian Christian.
Yes.
Could they be of any other religion, Assyrians?
I think it depends on what their religion is. So an Assyria would be a kind of race and ethnicity rather than kind of religion. So if they
they can be both Muslim. They can be Muslim, Christian.
I'm only assuming here. I'm not entirely
it's okay.
sure.
It's personal podcast anyway. But your experiences. You don't have to be historian. Don't worry. I just out of curiosity. Okay. So you wouldn't say that it's very common when you live in Syria. You are surrounded by Assyrian people or Assyrian community. It's not common.
It's not common, no.
It's not, yeah. No. Okay, so it's a rare thing. Is it rare to be Syrian Christian living and growing up in Syria? Because I know it's only 10% or something like this.
Exactly, precisely. So, yeah. So I think the country is predominantly Muslim. So you have Islam constitutes to 75% of kind of religion in terms of Syrian people, and then you have 10%, roughly 10% of Christians. And among these Christians, of course, among Islam there are different types, and among Christianity there are also different types. So how it was like growing up, I think religion itself didn't really play a role growing up. It was eventually how you practice your religion. You go to church, you go to mosque. But it was more of a cultural thing. So people from similar cultures, depending on where they lived, which city, what part of the city, this would sometimes make a difference from one person to the other. But religion itself, I have to say, so I grew up mainly in Syria. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, by the way. It was very it was very accurate. So yes, I was
It is accurate. Michael is a genuine person.
I was born in Tartus, which is a coastal city, like you said, and my parents are from there. But we settled and lived almost all our lives in Syria, in Damascus, the capital of Syria. So Damascus and Tartus are the cities I spent most time in when I was in Syria, but mostly in Damascus. But I can easily say that they're both very open-minded, kind of tolerant cities. So religion wouldn't make a huge difference. It would the only difference that would make that you go to a different place to practice. You celebrate different holidays. But when it came, for example, to everyday life, me and my friends at school, we almost never recognized that what this person is from that religion or that person is from this religion. Mm-hmm. Only when it came to religious education, we have to kind of separate and go to different classrooms and have different period. Only for that period. After it's done, you go back to your normal classroom and just continue living together.
Okay, yeah. So you didn't feel much difference, yeah? You didn't distinguish each other, like, okay, you're a Christian, I'm Muslim, only through like church or lessons, as you said.
Yeah, there was perfect harmony, let's call it like that.
Would you say it's because you lived and come from rather big cities? So if you were raised somewhere very conservative or opposite, very Christian and less Muslim dominant, could it be a different experience, or it would be the same still? Because Damascus, as I understand from what you're saying, is rather liberal for Syria and generally sounds like a liberal and amazing place. Would you say if you'd experienced life in a village, predominantly Muslim or any other religion, would it be a different experience, or it still would be pretty much the same?
It might have been different, and I think it applies to not only Syria, other countries as well.
Definitely. In the rural area.
Yeah, exactly. So in major cities, you'd have more educated. I mean, in general, you have more educated people. You have more people who traveled more, a little bit more open-minded. So hence being more tolerant. In rural areas, you'd have less or fewer of these people. So you might. And again, it's pure theoretical, but I think it might be true. If you are a minority of religion living in a rural area, you might feel different. I can say that in terms of major kind of daily life basis interactions, I don't think that Christians or minorities would be treated differently. But I think in terms of interactions and kind of more integrations, yes, there is a chance that if they're living in a rural area, they're not feeling exactly like they belong there.
Because it would be predominantly Muslim area and community would be Muslim, correct?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I understood. Okay, great. So you sort of answered my question. I was going to start with asking you to introduce your background. Maybe I still ask it in terms of your parents and grandparents. So all of your family, as I understood, of both of your mom's side and that side, were born in Syria and lived there, right? Before the moving outside.
Yes. Yeah.
So all your generations, your ancestors, as much as you know them, were they all Syrian Christians or they were mixed? If you're aware. If not, it's fine.
I think they were all, as far as I'm aware, they were always Syrian Christians. Yeah.
Okay, let's maybe talk about religion generally in Syria. So as I understand, and from my little knowledge, Syria back then, maybe it wasn't called Syria, used to be Christian country before it was Muslim, right? And when did it happen?
So I think historically, if we go way back, it was occupied at some point by the pharaohs of Egypt. Then coming to after Christ, it was even before that, I think it was a Persian kind of territory, followed by the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire, followed by Islam. So I think until the years of 700, so I think the 6th century or 6th or 7th century is when Islam came to the country, and the whole area became kind of an Islamic part of the Islamic State at that time. So historically, it was not one country called Syria; it was larger than this. So the countries that we know now that are Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Iraq, they used to be one big country called the Levant. And
so it's called country. It used to be called country Levant.
It used to be, yes, one country.
For just area.
Yeah, exactly.
Country, okay.
And at the time, like we said, so Islam came and it became part of the Islamic empire, or the Islamic State at the time it used to be called. So prior to this, it used to be, I think the majority was Christianity in the country. Followed by this, it became a predominantly Muslim country.
Okay, yeah, which is up until now, yeah. Are there any other religions in Syria apart from Islam and Christianity?
So, yeah, I haven't met anyone who's neither Christian nor a Muslim, to be honest, but I think there used to be a minority of Jewish people, and there is now also Druze people in terms of religion. And I think they come from something called, well, in Arabic, the English translation is the Mountain of Druze.
How is it called in Arabic?
Jabal al-Druze.
Jabal, okay, can I pronounce it? Okay. Jabal
al-Druze.
Druze. Also, Druze is the same.
Yeah.
So Jabal means mountain.
Yeah, exactly.
Jabal. Is it correct pronunciation? Jabal.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe I can learn Arabic. Nice. Since we are talking about ethnicities, I was reading about Aramean people, and it says that it's very hard to count them, the present population. Do they still live in Syria, or it's very rare? because they are old ethnicity, right?
They are
Old
very old kind of native Syrians, actually.
Mesopotamia. They're not Assyrians. They're different.
They're not. No, they're different from particularly Assyrians.
And I read that their language, that Assyrian language was based on their language or something like this?
Yes, so that's my understanding. So I know that the Aramic language is the language of the Bible. So we're talking year of just after Christ. So the kind of 1st century. So I'm not entirely sure about their presence at the moment.
You never met?
No.
Okay. Yeah, they're probably older nation. But, well, I guess, as you said, they probably got mixed, right? Maybe even they live there. I talk like I'm from Syria. Oh, they should be there. Okay, but that used to be ethnicity in Mesopotamia, for sure. Yeah, like if we say Syrians and everyone. And then, obviously, after all the invasions and history what happened. Okay, great. The reason I'm curious about them is because when I was Googling, it says that Aramean, the translation of it means nomad, and I am like nomad. I'm Kalmyk and I'm of Mongolian origin, and my people are nomads. And I was thinking, oh, there is another nomads in Syria, because Syria generally is not nomadic country, right? The people normally stay there on the place.
Yes.
Unlike Mongols, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they're more attached to the place. Yeah. So Arameans apparently, I don't know why it's called nomads. Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many things to learn about. Why didn't I learn it about school? I don't know. I didn't learn about Mesopotamian school. Okay, so let's get back to your identity. As we already discussed, you didn't feel different growing up in Syria, being Christian. But how about the cultural differences? So I will clarify my question. What are the main cultural differences between you and, let's say, Syrian Muslim person? I know that differences might be obvious because obviously you're Christian, it's Muslim. But what I want to highlight here, because it's not very common for maybe Western world when there is a Christian minority in a Muslim country. So I wonder whether being Christian in a predominantly Muslim country has shaped your own traditions and cultures somehow, maybe in terms of arranged marriages or institute of family or some other cultures. Are there any differences or maybe even similarities with Syrian Muslims which you'd find?
Yes, of course. That's a very good point, actually. So definitely there will be differences in terms of cultural differences. The simplest are holidays that we celebrate, holidays that Muslims celebrate, the way of fasting, for example, in preparation for a major holiday. So we must have all heard of Ramadan, where the month where Muslims, they fast in preparation for their coming holiday, which is called Eid, and particularly Eid al-Fitr, which is breaking the fast. Translation. So, for example, they fast from early hours of the morning until the evening, not eating anything, not drinking anything, and then they're allowed to eat and drink, which is very, just like any other fasting. It's kind of spiritually preparing you for the holiday. For example, on the other hand, Christians, they fast completely differently. They can eat and drink throughout the whole day, but they can't eat anything that's kind of coming from animals, not even dairy products. So
eggs as well?
Eggs as well. So what we now in this modern life call vegetarian.
Oh, right.
Basically.
Oh, I think I know. It's in April, yeah, you do. No?
Yes, so it's the
Russian
Lent.
Christian do as
Yes,
well.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's called the Lent. But actually, having said that, I think it's vegan, where you don't have anything that's animal kind of product at all.
Okay.
So that's one of many other cultural differences. Some of these differences are affected by religion itself, so rather than kind of growing up there. So, for example, Christians are allowed to drink alcohol. It's not alcohol is not
Yeah.
Alcohol is not mentioned to be something you shouldn't do in their religion. So is ham or pork. both of which are among Muslims not allowed as per their religion for their own beliefs and their own reasons. So this kind of comes also as a difference, as a cultural difference. Another thing is marriage. For example, in the Islamic law, you're allowed to marry more than once, up to 4 times.
Is it common though nowadays? Do people marry more than 4? Or more than 4? More than 1? More than 4 has to have a big bank account.
It's not common, having said that. So I was going to get to that point.
Okay, we're going to actually discuss it. Let's leave it for later.
So, for example, in Islam, they're allowed to marry up to 4, have to 4 wives. In Christianity, or not. So there are these differences that are majorly kind of a little bit influenced by law, and a little bit influenced. Yeah, exactly.
But is there any specifically for Syria? What I meant, maybe I didn't clarify my question. Is there any ways how Syrian Muslim people influence Syrian Christian people, or you stay very in your own community and nothing influences you? For example, are there any of cultural traits of Syrian Muslim who influenced Syrian Christian, or they didn't?
I can't really think of any, because apart from the differences, there are plenty of similarities.
For example?
So, for example, premarital sex is, whether it's in Islam, is not allowed, it's prohibited, but also in Christianity is not allowed. If you're following the Bible, it's not. So it's something that...
Are there many people following Bible?
Well, that at the end of the day is a personal kind of belief, whether you want to follow it or not. That's completely your choice. But I can't speak for Syrian people, but I think culturally we know that these things are, let's say, recommended by the Bible or the Quran, and people tend to follow them, at least.
There's more of similarities, yeah?
Yes.
Family-wise. And generally, I guess, would you say that both Muslim and Christian community in the country are rather traditional, and family and all these values are pressured and valued? Or you'd say it's very personal and depends on the family? Or if we would bluntly generalize, you would say that normally if you met someone Syrian of your religion or of any other religion, they would tend to stick to their culture and family and listen to their parents? Or would you say it's very, very personal?
I think the general rule is you usually marry someone from your religion. At least up until recently, that was still the case. So despite all similarities, it seems to be one major difference that they did not really agree on. So in Syria, by the Syrian law, you cannot marry someone from a different religion. You have to be both.
By Syrian law, you can't?
Yes.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
So
I thought it's just in Islam, no?
No, it's the law of the country.
Oh really?
Yeah, you cannot marry someone from a different religion. What people tend to do is that they go somewhere else. So you have 2 options. Let's say 2 people from different religion, they want to get married, a Christian and a Muslim. They have 2 options. They either travel outside, so travel abroad where it's allowed, get married and come back to the country, or one of them has to change their religion.
Okay, they can do it within the country, or they have to do it outside?
Yes.
Outside.
So they can change their religion in the country. It's fine. You can change your religion. It's not a big deal. No.
Okay.
You can change it, but you have to be of the same religion to get married.
Okay, so let's say if you wanted to... By the way, Michael is married, so no pressure. But if you hypothetically wanted to get married, if fall in love with a Muslim woman, not you, someone Syrian Christian, would it be more common that you would convert and become Muslim, or she would have to? How does it... Or it's just in between people, they decide together? Or normally, only Muslim, she would never convert to Christianity?
I think it comes down to the couple, but it has...
So personal,
yeah.
Personal choice. Okay, interesting. Is it common now when people are converting?
I think it's becoming more common.
Our generation, yeah. But
And-
it's still judged, or it's not judged.
I think it is judged especially by older generation. So the current generation, especially affected by the war that's been going on for roughly last 10 years. Now, obviously, it's getting better, but this war has brought to the Syrian people's attention the fact that perhaps you can die anytime. So
Life is short, yeah.
Exactly. So appreciate love and disregard the religious dissimilarities or differences. So I think what's becoming a little bit more common is people traveling somewhere, getting married and coming back,
All right.
and living together, not having to change one's religion.
Same different religious.
Yes.
All right. Oh, because according to law, they would have got married. They married in a different place, and they didn't go against the law. Yeah.
Yeah. So legally
Okay.
they are married, and regardless where they are married, and they are living in Syria.
Oh, okay. So they didn't cross the law. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh, I understood because I didn't understand in the beginning what I was saying about it. Since you mentioned war, and I just wanted to ask you how things are going now, and how would you say, apart from life is short and appreciate love and changing in marriage, how would you say it influenced people of we're almost the same generation, of our generation? How did the current situation influence maybe mentality or even identity-wise of your generation? Again, you don't have to answer for all nation, just from your own experience. Because even what is going on in Russia, I feel it influences me in some levels, but you have different situation. First of all, I definitely think that things like this, wars, they influence us, like any generational trauma what my people went through and what is been going on now. So from your experience, how do you think it changed people of your generation?
So I think war is a sad thing, of course, and people who are affected directly by it are the people who are suffering the most. So whether someone has, unfortunately, I know people who lost some of their loved ones because of the war. Luckily, I have to say I'm very lucky. I was lucky enough not to having gone through this personally, but I know people who did. So it will shape actually people after losing a loved one, for example. Also, people might have lost their jobs. Sometimes, if not a person, they might have lost their job, their property, their houses. Sometimes, so of course it affects them. But if you want to look at the silver lining, I think sometimes it helps you mature. It helps you learn to understand the person sitting opposite to you, rather than immediately kind of trying to disagree with them. And I remember this from the early years of war when I was still in the country. Regardless of what my political opinion was, if I had someone from an opposing opinion, I would consider them wrong. I would consider that I'm right and they're wrong, and they would do exactly the same, because it was something very new, something happening at that time. You
mean when it was just when it started?
When it had just started, this is how it felt for almost everyone, that you're either right or there is no other option. But growing more into it, reading more, learning how to know what's true and not to judge like the book by its cover, you learn to understand that person. You learn to have a civil conversation. Hopefully, that was the case for me, that we reach a stage where our political opinion doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what's happening.
And who is safety, yeah?
Exactly. And what's more important is how to focus on your differences to come for common grounds, and to appreciate these differences and learn from them.
Yeah, it's actually maybe I think it's very important thing to learn, even just for one person to be able to. I think develops your not only maturity but empathy, obviously, yeah. It's a very beautiful thing to learn, but through like such a horrible experience. And would you say would you say people learned it, or there are still some sort of opposing opinions exist in the country, if we talk within the country?
My impression is that people really learned. I obviously left the country 6 years ago now, roughly 6 or 7 years ago, when I came here and just continuing my education. But I've been going back less frequently, but I've been going back to the country, and every time I go, I realize that people are not fussed anymore about who's winning, who's losing. From political kind of opposing parties' point of view, they want what's best for their families, they want what's best for their friends. They started to learn how to live together regardless of their differences.
Okay, yeah, because you were already in not adulthood, but in your years, let's say in your adult years when it started, right? So you sort of witnessed since when did it start, by the way?
2011.
Like officially.
Yes.
Yeah, 11. So yeah, you were already not a baby, not a child, right? So you sort of lived through it. Would you say it had some impact on you personally? Because I don't know, actually, we only talked 6 years ago about that, but I remember you said that some of your friends or relatives were kidnapped, or even you were kidnapped. Is that correct? No?
Someone from my friends, yes.
Yeah. Would you say all this experience and you witnessed all this war conflict which is going on, do you think it influenced you personally, or it's early to say, and because you didn't live there for the last few years, you don't feel it as sharply? Do you think it's influenced you in ways?
I think it's a combination of what you said. So yeah, it probably affected me a little bit, but not greatly, because again, I consider myself lucky not to be directly affected by harm. But at the same time, having not lived there makes it a little bit more of a distant kind of memory.
Okay, because why I asked it partly also, we actually met 6 years ago when you just moved here, yeah? So you moved from Syria straight. Because when I met you, how old you were? Like 26?
Yes.
You already seem to be, to me, like very mature person. I think it's because of like the background of your country, because I think I'm a mature person and my country doesn't have the easiest history as well. But when I met you, even now, I think you're very mature. So yeah, I guess what you said actually just connects and makes sense, that it matures people. Let's go back to culture and identity, and we're probably gonna wrap up soon. Do you have Syrian community in the UK? Is there many Syrian people? But precisely Syrian Christian. Are you guys tend to stick together, or you not really friendly people? Well, from you, it feels like very friendly people.
Thank you. Yes, so I met a few Christian people, Christian Syrians, in London when I was working in London. And I went to a church that's very similar to my kind of church back home. So it's mainly Christian Arabs in that church, and the majority of them were Lebanese and Syrian. And we also had some Iraqi or Palestinian.
Okay, I didn't know about Iraqi Christian. I have another question. Okay, sorry, go on. So, Christian Arabs, Iraqi and Palestinian.
So yes. I met a few Christian Syrians and went to that church with mainly kind of a Christian Arab church. The majority were Lebanese and Syrians, but also had Christian Iraqis and Palestinians. And to answer your question whether we stick to each other or not, I think it's what I found is a very kind of warm, welcoming kind of demeanor from them. They were super helpful, especially for newcomers to the country. So anyone who's left their country, came to a new place, they will find it difficult at first, regardless of how mature or well they are.
Regardless you have job or not job, because it's a different, it's immigration, right? Different experience.
Exactly, and they were very welcoming and very, very helpful, actually, even if it were only kind of sometimes emotional support. Having said that, we don't exclusively see each other's or kind of interact with each other's. Of course, we see each other's every once in a while in church. We do social stuff, so that's speaking for mainly Christian Syrians and a few other nationalities. But we also try and integrate as much as we can with the culture in the UK. Eventually, we are living here, and some of us...
Yeah, of course.
Some of us are planning to kind of stay here long term, and it would make more sense to integrate.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, about Lebanese and Iraqi, are they have similar history to Syria? They are Christian because Christianity was there long before Islam, or somehow differently? Was it like converted?
I think it's a very, very similar story, yes.
Okay. Yeah, my question actually was about what you do to feel reconnected to your culture, but I guess you already feel reconnected. You sort of have community here, right? Of people who are the same religion. Actually, I feel a bit jealous because I don't have that. But I feel very connected to a lot of people from coming different experiences, so I am grateful for that. But I meant like, I don't think Kalmyk community tend to do this. Well, only few people, but still, I feel this lack of a community feeling. I don't know why. Maybe it could have been better. Maybe it is what it is. Maybe to finish, to wrap up, I want to ask you like the last question. Well, actually, I realized that I need to learn more about Mesopotamia and Assyrians because it sounds super interesting and exciting. And the last question I wanted to ask you is, what advice would you give to people about how to embrace your origin and your identity?
I think if you are at a happy place with who you are, it's really kind of a good balance. So we all know that there's almost in the whole world, there's no one country where they don't allow any other nationalities or any other people to integrate with them. So if you're here or you're elsewhere and you have your own identity, you have your own culture, your own upbringing, your own ethnicity, and you're somewhere different, first of all, try and see it from their perspective. Because understandably sometimes they are not very happy with what they call foreigners coming into their countries. Just see it from their perspective. Are you bringing anything to their country? And most likely you are. You are here studying, you are here working, you are here even visiting. But you are bringing something new to them. And kind of secondly, just be proud of who you are. If it means so much to you, try and keep it on living through your work, through your interactions with other people, but don't force it. So that I think my advice would be a key word of do not force your identity, your culture on others, because at the end of the day, you just like you are entitled to yours, they are entitled to theirs. If they're interested, tell them more about it, and you'll find more than often people are very interested into listening to other people's cultures. Just like what Violetta is doing here. So my key thing is take pride in who you are. Teach it to your kids if you're interested. Teach them that balance of where they're coming from, their origins, and what they're doing now and where they're living. If they have that balance, perfect. They can have the best of two worlds, if you might call it.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good advice. I think it's advice of a mature person. I feel Michael is pretty much mature and experienced in life and living in different countries and being through conflicts and not being through conflicts. Okay, great. Let's finish now. And I'm really, through preparing for this podcast and generally communicating to you, I realized that there's so much to learn, and hopefully I, at some point, if I have second, third or fourth season of my podcast, I'll do more about Mesopotamia and like just the Syrians, because I don't know anything about indigenous people of Middle East. I realized that, and I still left with these questions, but it can go on for longer if I'll just ask you 10 more questions now. Great, thank you very much, Michael. I was so happy to have this conversation, and hopefully I see you again soon, not just one time in 6 years. I was really glad to have this conversation and to do this episode with you. Thanks.
No, of course, thank you. Thanks for having me, and great seeing you again, and we'll definitely meet up fairly soon.
Thanks everyone for listening, and bye-bye.
Әтесі қызны қабыл етер ғабдыр ғазиз оқи Истфакта әмір ханның бар өзінің бүлмесі әр күн кіші келі Фатихларға Ибрахим бәй кетті әмірліклерге шығысы келмей берді орамға Радиф кашап хаманы жиһанында юғалмайсың әлиф Ormanında қызық болса қара ки таплардасың